Hello world, my name is Andy Silvers and today we're going to talk about the G10 refresh of the HP ZBook Fury. Alright, welcome back to my channel. We're going to talk about the latest ZBook Fury G10 model. This is not a review as the device is not even available for sale yet. This is more of an overview of the product to give potential buyers an understanding of what the new device has over the previous generation and what the ZBook Fury is about in general. First, I want to let you know that this channel is not currently monetized. So if you would like to support me, please like this video and subscribe, and also leave a comment. It's really cool when I get to interact with viewers. If you want to support me more directly, please consider purchasing one of my books. Yes, I am an author. I have written 3 books, and a 4th one is on the way. It sounds like I'm talking about my children. Anyway, I've written 3 books, and a 4th one is on the way. Those 3 books are available in the video description. 2 of them are for children, and 1 of them is for teens and adults. So we have books for all ages, so please check those out. Alright, so it's not a surprise that HP is refreshing their ZBook Fury with 13th gen Intel CPUs because every other company is doing it, and HP wants to be on the bandwagon. So basically, what HP is doing is they are taking the ZBook body, the new one, the G9 body that they redesigned, and they're updating it with the latest technology. So everything is mostly staying the same, like the screen options are basically the same, the DDR5 memory is basically the same, storage capacity is exactly the same, up to 12 terabytes. But they updated it to Intel's 13th gen CPUs. So, first it's worth noting that the ZBook Fury represents HP's most expensive and best overall computer in the entire lineup, and that includes Omens, that includes the Victus laptops and the Envies and the Spectres. It's literally the top laptop they make. That doesn't mean it's perfect for everyone, but it is technically the pinnacle of what HP are capable of with their technological advances. So, the ZBook Fury is a mobile workstation, which is my favorite class of computers, and it is designed for people who are architects, animators, video editors, people who code, people who are doing 3D design and rendering, and people who supervise those who are doing all of those things. So let's talk about the specs real quick and see how they compare to the previous Fury G9. So a lot of stuff is the same this year. So let's start with the one key thing that is different, which is the CPUs. This starts with the base Core i5-13600HX, which has about 14 cores, 20 threads. It's kind of incredible to think about technology advancing, right? I mean, the lowest end CPU not that long ago, like 2 years ago, was like quad core. Now the lowest end CPU is 14 cores. But anyway, up from that is the i7-13850HX. That one has 28 threads. And then you have the i9-13950HX. And the i7-13700HX. And the i9 again, 13900HX. Intel has dropped the mobile Xeon product line all the way back with 11th gen. Although they dropped it at 12th gen, and the last version was 11th. And the reason for that is because I believe all these CPUs support ECC memory, so that's good. The consumer quote-unquote CPUs now support ECC memory, and HP provides ECC memory as an option if you would like to. And you can go up to 128 gigabytes of memory, which is the same for the past 4 or 5 plus generations of ZBook. It's just that the speed is now different. You can go to 4800 megahertz of ECC memory and 5600 megahertz of non-ECC memory. So the 13th gen CPUs are a noticeable improvement over the 12th gen CPUs. The bump in performance, in my experience and research, is not quite as substantial as the bump in performance between, say, 11th gen and 12th gen. So, for instance, that's one of the reasons why I bought, well, one of the reasons why I bought a gaming computer, which is this right here, the Lenovo Legion, is because I wanted something that was designed to max out the performance as much as possible. The ZBooks, despite their noteworthy performance, are not designed to max out performance per se. They're designed to give you a lot of performance, but, held back a little bit to help with thermals, to help with consistency and sort of quality control. So that's something to be aware of. The top-end Core i9 CPUs have a staggering 24 cores and 36 megabytes of level 3 cache, which is incredible. They have 32 threads. Okay, so the performance cores have a 2.2 gigahertz base frequency. It can go all the way up to 5.4 gigahertz max frequency on that Core i9, which is pretty impressive. I'd be curious to see if there's a noteworthy performance difference between the Core i9 and Core i7, because, of course, even though this laptop is thick and has a lot of cooling capabilities, it also is relevant the actual power that HP is allotting to the CPUs in the BIOS. If HP isn't allotting enough power to these 13th gen CPUs, they may perform closer to the i7s because of power limitations, which is something that I mentioned in one of my videos a while back of the ZBook G8. I said it had a fatal flaw. And that fatal flaw, I said, was basically the power brick. It was only a 200 watt power brick, whereas a lot of other manufacturers were delivering 230 watt, 280 watt, etc. But here's the thing. I was actually right but wrong, because it's not really the power brick that decides how much power the computer gets. It's actually the BIOS, right? HP actually decides how much wattage and voltage the CPU is allowed to have. So you can give the ZBook a much bigger power brick, which I did. I gave it an extra 30 watts, which in laptop speak is a lot of extra watts, and it didn't make that much of a difference. And so, which is why I didn't do a video about it. But it's just worth noting that. So we'll have to test it. We'll have to wait for the actual units to be available to people to see if the Core i9 is actually tangibly worth it as compared to the i7. So with this device, a lot of things don't change. So Windows 11 and Ubuntu, both being available, are the same. The 128 gig capacity of RAM is the same. There are 4 RAM slots, which is honestly more than enough for a laptop, but it's worth noting. The total amount of storage capacity, 12 terabytes, is also the same. The screen options, so far as I can tell, are exactly the same. The audio appears to be the same. The SD card speed appears to be the same. The ports appear to be exactly the same. And I'll actually get back to the ports in a minute, because there is something that's lacking a bit there. Most of the software features that come with the computer appear to be the same. You get the same Wolf Pro security, the same fingerprint reader on select models, and the same 230 watt maximum power brick. That doesn't mean it'll come with all units, but if you spec it up, you'll get the 230 watt brick. All that stuff is basically the same. The GPUs do appear to be a bit different, though. So we have, for discrete graphics, because it's a workstation, we have the A series GPUs. Although they're not all called A anymore, and the reason is because the irony is that NVIDIA's architecture has a similar name. You have Ampere, right, for the 30 series cards, and Ada, or Ada Lovelace, for the 40 series cards, but both of those have an A in them. So it's a bit confusing from a naming convention standpoint. So the manufacturer literally just decided to spell it out for you and just put Ada generation in every single name. I think they should have just called it the L. So for instance, the L5000, the L4000, because that would mean Ada Lovelace, but whatever. So the top GPU is the RTX 5000 Ada generation with 16 gigabytes of GDDR6 VRAM, which is a lot. There's the RTX 4000 ADA, the 3500 ADA, which is kind of a unique like middle ground. It has the same 12 gigs as the 4000, so I suspect the difference there is not so much VRAM capacity, but number of CUDA cores, number of ray tracing cores, and speed, you know. And then there's the RTX 2000 ADA with 8 gigs of VRAM. So a year ago, or 2 years ago, I purchased the ZBook Fury G8, and I got it with an RTX A3000, which was the Ampere architecture, and that one had 6 gigabytes of VRAM. So now that slot, if you will, has been dedicated or been given to the RTX A1000. That now has that 6 gigs, and it says A1000. So that means that it has the Ampere architecture and not the Ada Lovelace architecture. The Ada Lovelace architecture is based on TSMC's, I believe it's the 4 nanometer process, so it's more efficient, more powerful. If you've seen the performance from the 40 series desktop graphics cards, you'll know just how incredible they are. Obviously, every single one of these GPUs is going to be cut back. You know, it's not going to be giving you 400 watts, for instance, in just the GPU alone, because the laptop doesn't even support that. But certainly you're going to get a lot more performance out of the Ada series GPUs. But until these GPUs are in laptops, in people's hands, it's not 100% clear exactly how they'll perform in the real world. So the port selection appears to be very good, but there's actually a mismatch, because on HP's main website, it says that there's an HDMI 2.0B, but that's pretty old standard at this point. I mean, the ZBook G7, I believe, had that. But if you actually go into HP's data sheet, it says it's HDMI 2.1. And HDMI 2.1 is what the ZBook from, you know, the last gen had as well. So that's a bit of a, I guess, you know, an inconsistency there. I would be willing to trust the datasheet. However, the datasheet and the other one says one RJ45 Ethernet port. Now, Ethernet is great, especially on a laptop that's as thick as a school bus. But the thing is that it doesn't specify 2.5 gigabit or even 10 gigabit or anything like that. 13th gen CPUs can support it, and a lot of other laptops, including gaming laptops, have 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. So it's really a shame to see HP not doing that here when the CPU has more than enough PCI Express lanes and bandwidth for that. And it's 13th gen, it's G10 model, it's about time for 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. A lot of professionals really want and really need that. There are 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, USB-C of course, with power delivery and DisplayPort 1.4 capabilities. Although don't expect to charge your laptop with a USB-C charger, because I mean it's insanely powerful. So don't expect that. You got a headphone microphone combo. Thank goodness that's still there. Plenty of room for it, obviously. There are 2 USB Type A ports. They can both support charging like a smartphone or something. And there's a mini DisplayPort 1.4a, which is nice to see. It's actually pretty rare to see a mini DisplayPort on a laptop, and HP has done this for the past several generations. So it's cool to see that still here. And last but not least, there's a full-size SD card reader. Like with the last generation, the SD card goes basically all the way into the computer, so you don't have to worry about it sticking out and getting snapped in half or something like that. One thing that basically stays the same is the keyboard. It is the same quiet keyboard that HP has used for the last generation. It is still a very nice keyboard, and it has per-key RGB backlighting, which is pretty cool. It's a very gaming-oriented feature there, but I didn't really think I would like having per-key RGB on my gaming laptop, but it's been kind of nice to be able to change the color of the backlighting, depending on the environment that I'm in, to help with visibility. So that's something that's better to have than not have it. You can always change all the keyboard lights to white if you want to. The screen options appear to be basically the same on the ZBook Fury. The maximum screen is a pretty cool 3840 by 2400, 120 Hz IPS anti-glare 500 nit HDR screen that supports 100% of DCI-P3. It may be slightly less than that in practice, but that's basically their dream color. I love HP's dream color. I had it on my previous ZBook, which actually had a 600 nit reported peak brightness, so it's gone down slightly. I suspect that's because it's a trade-off they're making to help improve color accuracy, although we'll have to see with the finished model. Most of these displays are a 16 by 10 aspect ratio. Again, I am willing to bet money on it that HP is going to move to 3 by 2 aspect ratio in the next 1 to 2 generations. It just makes sense. It just makes sense. They need something to upgrade, something to improve. And 3 by 2 is a wonderful aspect ratio for content creation because it gives you a lot of vertical real estate for working with 3D software, any software. It just gives you so much more real estate, which is really beneficial. There's also an OLED screen option, which is really cool. If you're looking for something that has better pixel response times, OLED has some of the best response times across the board, and no matter what manufacturer is producing it. OLED just has this crisp sharpness to it that most other panel types just can't reproduce. But the peak brightness will be a little bit lower at a reported 400 nits, but it's still worth keeping that in mind. And there's a HD display. Now what's interesting is that it's 1920 by 1080, so it's not even 16 by 10. So what that means is that HP has a panel at the factory that has a big, probably big bottom bezel on it in order to accommodate that 16 by 9 display. I wouldn't recommend anyone ever buy this display, actually. Not even because, everyone needs a ton of resolution or color accuracy, but because of the peak brightness being around 250 nits. That's garbage. And I don't use that word lightly. Because again, this laptop, the ZBook Fury, is going to start at probably $2,500 or more. So, why would you want an Ada generation GPU and a Core i9 just to have a 250 nit display that you could find on a Chromebook? It doesn't make any sense. So be aware of that. I would never recommend anyone purchase that, but it is there if you're into that sort of thing. The RAM is basically the same as before. There's ECC option and non-ECC options available. 128 gig total. 4 slots. There are also 4 SSD slots. So with the G9, HP did away with the hard drive bay, the 2.5-inch bay that could house either a hard drive or a SATA SSD. Now it's all NVMe, which I think is perfectly fine for a high-end laptop. As I said in my last video, not my last video, but my video covering the G9 ZBook Fury, I really like what they did with the inside of the computer. They changed it. It's not a dual layer sort of layout anymore. So for instance, with the old ZBook, you had the bottom panel came off and there was a bunch of components that you could access, right? But then the top panel, or really the keyboard, came out and there was even more components. But here's the problem. When you do that, it actually basically turns into 2 different layers, right? There's one layer with one sort of slice of components, like 2 RAM slots and an SSD slot or whatever. And then there's another layer with all the other stuff. That means that the inside of the laptop isn't really as thick as the outside of the laptop makes it look like it is. So by HP changing this design and having the keyboard be locked in place, you can't lift up the keyboard anymore. This makes the interior effectively thicker without actually making the laptop thicker, because it's not this dual layer design anymore. It's just one thick inner layer. So everything has more room. And as such, HP was able to stack things on top of each other. So RAM is stacked on top of each other. SSDs are stacked on top of each other, which is perfectly reasonable. And of course, 2 of the SSD slots support double-sided SSDs, which is where HP is getting these 12 terabyte maximum capacities from. The new design here, with the interior being sort of more thick, if you will, than it actually have more room, more capacity, helps with cooling, because it means that the fans in the device can be thicker in terms of depth. Now HP says that they're the thinnest fans that they've ever had, but that doesn't refer to the depth of the fans. That refers to the blades on the fans. The blades are thinner, which allow more air and reduce or increase efficiency, because if the blades are thicker, that makes the blades heavier, which makes them harder to spin around. So by having the blades be thinner, they can still push the same amount of air, but they're not as heavy, so it's much easier for them to move around quickly. So that's important. But the problem is that the HP ZBook doesn't have a lot of exhaust room, or it does in some sense. The entire back of the computer is a large heat sink, but a lot of it's covered up by both the screen and the screen sort of hinge. So I'm a little concerned about how that will affect performance. So my Lenovo Legion is very thin, but it has a lot of ventilation. It has tons of ventilation across the back, and it has 2 vents on either side of the computer. And when I'm doing a benchmark or something, you can feel air being shot out of it. So I am a little worried about how the ZBook will actually handle in the real world pushing out air, with the vent on the back being somewhat obscured by the laptop's own design. We will have to see how performance actually is in the real world. The ZBook Fury G8 did not have this design flaw, if you could call it that, because the back had like open ventilation. You could see the grills, and there was a lot of air that you could feel coming out. In other words, HP has taken this sort of Apple MacBook Pro pre-Apple Silicon days. They've taken that approach where air just kind of blasts out towards the screen and kind of down, and it's not ideal. The audio is handled by Bang & Olufsen again. I suspect it will be pretty good since there's a lot of room inside for larger drivers and subwoofers and such, but we will have to see. There's a lot of security software built in, as per the usual. Besides the software you get with Windows 11, which is pre-installed, you also get things like HP Security Manager, SureSense, HP Secure Platform, Biosphere Gen 6, the HP Wolf Security software, Device Access Manager, Privacy Key, Tamper Lock on select models, Trusted Platform TPM2, the standard stuff that you would expect with HP's higher-end business devices. What do you think of the new ZBook Fury G10? It's very similar to the previous model, but with some revisions to the graphics card and CPU options. Please let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you in the next video.